Hello, FastGraphs subscribers. This is Chuck Carnevale, co-founder of FastGraphs, the Fundamentals Analyzer software tool. And it's my great pleasure to once again welcome you to a FastGraph tutorial. Today, I'm going to go over all the features and methods that you have available to you on the basic FastGraph itself. Okay, so this tutorial is just to familiarize you with everything that's available on the tool. In subsequent videos, I'll be showing you how to use those features effectively. I'll be just sort of introducing them to you today so that you know what is available, what you can access, and how you can manipulate the basic FastGraph, historical FastGraph tool. So this is strictly going to be on the historical FastGraph. We're not going to look at forecasting. I'm going to take a brief look at performance here, but I do want you to know that there are many features available to FastGraph. Some of them are hidden, and consequently, we discovered that some of our subscribers aren't aware of them. So let's go ahead and get into the tool and let's, look at things that you can access and ways that you can utilize the tool. Now, first of all, you know that the basic tool gives you the ability to look at many metrics in relationship to the stock price. These are valuation references and valuation metrics. Up here at the top, you've got the earnings metrics, you've got adjusted operating earnings, basic earnings. You just simply click on it, automatically changes. You've got diluted earnings, which are GAAP. Basic and diluted are typically GAAP earnings. You've got operating cash flow, free cash flow. Most of you know these things already. You've got other metrics like EBITDA, EBIT, and then sales, of course, and I won't go through them all. So you can access all these various metrics by simply going to the Metrics tab here. Then you've got Portfolio tabs. Okay, this is where you can access the portfolios that you have either produced or the ones that are already premium portfolios if you're a premium subscriber that are preloaded, like the S&P 500, the Dividend Aristocrats, the Canada, etc. And you can also, access all of these are my own personal portfolios that I've made, and I've, titled them for various things. And then if you're not a subscriber, you've got the opportunity to have the free trial portfolio with the US and Canada exchange. That gives you just a limited number of stocks. If you're not already a subscriber, you can test drive. But I do want to point out, you can go in here and select a portfolio like the Dividend Aristocrats, okay? And then that simply loads the Dividend Aristocrats in here. You can use the scroll down feature and then change that to other portfolios if you choose. But this then gives you a listing where you can just simply tab through all the other stocks that are Dividend Aristocrats. Okay, so that's what that allows you to do. Now, I'm going to go into Altria here, or the old what I call Philip Morris, and utilize it to illustrate a couple other things. Now, by the way, before I go any further, I think it's also intuitive that you can change time frames just by clicking these tabs up here. And those time frames simply give you 12 years of information, including forecasting information. So this isn't 12 years of history. This is, in this case, approximately 9 years and 3/4 of history, and then 2¼ years of future. As you can see, the future years are kind of, lightened up and given with dotted lines. That's to illustrate this is all historical reality, things that actually did happen and have already happened. And this is simply where we've added the forecasting tab. So you do get a little forecasting in the historical FastGraphs. The gray shaded area represents recessions. Just to give you perspective, this, of course, was the COVID flash crash, which was considered a recession. This is the 2008. We go back up to 20 years. That's all the data that we provide you, but that's more than adequate data in our opinion. Now, other features that I want to illustrate in the FastGraph, and I wanted to use Altria as an example. If you click this gear button here, okay, this gives you other things that you can do with FastGraphs. For example, you can reinvest dividend. Okay, so right now, if I checked performance, then you would see that the number of shares, this was based on a $10,000 investment in Philip Morris going back to January 4th, 2002 through September 6th, 2022, and you can see that the number of shares here stayed the same, and it shows you the growth yield or yield on cost, as most people call it. I like to always think of it as growth yield. And then you can also go into here, but we're going to save the performance graph and how to use it for later. But the reason I'm showing it today, because I'm focusing on the historical graph, is that if I go in here and hit the gear button and select Reinvest Dividends and then select Save Changes, now when I go into the performance graph, you will see that we have, we're purchasing additional shares with the dividend, and you can see the share count growing, and of course the performance results, change dramatically. All right. If you want to go back to the original, you simply uncheck the reinvestment dividends, hit the Save Changes button, and now you're back to the original number of shares. I also want to point out while I'm in this section that you can enter other valuation. Let's say you have $6,400, I'm making that number up, invested in Altria as an investor. By typing in that amount there, you can run the calculations on the amount of money that you actually have invested in the stock. So you can, alter the performance results based on preferences. You can put $1 million in there. You can put $1,000 in there. You can put an exact amount that you have. If you know the dates, you can even do that and it give you a good idea. It won't be perfect because this simply does year by year. Okay. But anyway, you can get some good ideas of what you got invested. So, always remember if you, to go back and use default items if you want. I'm going to go back to the 10,000, save the changes. That's our default period. That's the old mutual fund metaphor. You just use 10,000. So, those are the things available on the gear. So far, you can also do a log scale. And where a log scale gets important is if you have a company, for example, like Apple. Let's go ahead and look at Apple real quick. If I'm looking at Apple, where I have very, very fast growth, and I have extremely fast growth back in these early years, you really can't see, and the information is there, but you really can't see it. So by going to the gearbox and then clicking on the log scale and then hitting Save Changes, now I've drawn Apple logarithmically, and I can go back and look at all this detail. Now, one of the things that happens here is that I would suggest that you take off the dividend payout ratio when you're doing log scales, because notice that the dividend payout ratio here gets distorted. Now, I'll get into that a little more here in a few moments, but let's go ahead and uncheck the log scale and do Save Changes. And let's go back to Philip Morris, if you will, because this is a company that had some significant spinoffs, and the graph as it's set here is adjusted for all splits and spinoffs. In this case, it'll be spinoffs. So I can go back to the gearbox, hit this drop down, and spinoff adjusts is what it is. If I do unadjusted, this will be showing you what the graph looked like when they made the spinoffs and the splits. Now you can access that information by clicking this little bar down here and this, legend bar down here. You can say splits and spinoffs, and you can see that, one happened on April 2nd and one happened on March 31st, and that was Philip Morris International and Kraft, for those of you who follow the company. This big drop is not really an accurate drop. It stops here and then starts again here. This could even be drawn as a dotted line. But this shows you what the old original Philip Morris was before they spun off Philip Morris International and before they spun off Kraft. And this is showing you what the company's like since the spinoff. Okay, now, when you go back to the gearbox here and then hit adjusted, spinoff and split adjusted, and then hit Save Changes, now you get the graph where we've gone back and adjusted all of that information relative pro rata to the splits or spinoffs. Now, while we're on the subject of splits and spinoffs, over here you've got splits and spinoffs. You can click this and it gives you the dates of spinoffs, April 2nd, 2007 and March of 2008, March 31st. Now you can also see data on any splits. Now no splits are showing up on the graph, because the last split, as you can see here, was 1997, and that's behind what the graph already shows. But it does give you, the ability to see splits and spinoffs by looking at it. Now I'm going to go into another company here. I'm going to bring up Ecolab, and I bring it up for a reason, because Ecolab is a company that has about 10% growth, but it's a company that the market has valued at a very high price earnings ratio. So you might want to look here and see what the market was doing there. You have the ability to add your own custom valuation reference. You simply click this here. You can use the drop downs here, or you can simply enter a custom ratio. I'm going to put here for this particular one is 20. I'm going to hit Save Changes, and now you've drawn the peak line. And what I've done is I've drawn a valuation reference. Now I can analyze what I'm looking at. There was a period of time just coming out of the Great Recession where a 20-ish multiple, and I emphasize the word ish, was relevant to this company. Historically, it's traded at 25 to 30 times earnings. The long-term normal PE is 28. And then, of course, the formula valuation would indicate it ought to be a 15, but you can see a 15 PE other than maybe just very, very briefly for just maybe 1 day or a second. Ecolab's got, close to that, but it really isn't a relevant thing. So this allows you to just have information on how the market has valued the stock. Now, remember, these valuations change as you draw different time frames. Okay, so that's very important to keep in back of your mind. The blue line will change. The orange line and the pink line in this example pretty much stay the same, but that gives you the ability to add your own custom valuation ratio if you disagree with what you see on the graph, or you would simply like to add one of your liking that you feel would be more representative for the company. So, you can add it there. But again, when you do this, make sure if you decide to delete the valuation ratio, make sure you save the changes so that the valuation ratio is gone. But I'm going to leave it in there for a moment because I want to show you some other features about the fast graph historical chart as well. So I'm going to leave that valuation ratio in there. I can also take it off of the graph down here. This legend down here allows you to put the graph together and take it apart, and that can be very useful at times. For example, if I wanted to eliminate price off of the graph and just look at how the business is done, I can do that. I can take the normal PE off, and I can even take my custom valuation ratio off. And now I'm looking at the business with dividends. Now, I mentioned earlier that the white line shows the dividends, and the area below the white line is the payout ratio. So here you can see, if I simply click on this, it's paying out about 28.7%, roughly almost, a third of the money. You can see here, if I do it here, that it's 31.8%, but because earnings fell in 2020, then my payout ratio is up to 47% because I'm paying out a larger portion of a smaller number of earnings. Okay, now the problem is I want to remind you, when I went into the log scale and saved the changes, now it looks like the payout ratio is much higher than it actually is. So I like to take the dividend POR payout ratio off when I'm using the log scale, but you can leave it on and just ignore it, but it just distorts that view of the graph. So I think it's important to recognize that. Okay, now some people don't like to have the dividends on top. So let me do a more straightforward example. Let me do a Johnson & Johnson here for you. Here you've got the company, you've got the dividend payout ratio, and you can see that Johnson & Johnson pays out, 45 to 50% of its dividends historically. And this area here is simply stacked up here. Okay, the metaphor is when I put price on the graph, your capital appreciation is going to be, the price going from point A to point B, and that gives you the ability to calculate performance, which is a nice way to segue into the fact that you have this marvelous calculator functionality built into the fast graph. It's hidden, but you just do it by starting out always with a price point. But the point I'm trying to make here is the reason of stacking this area of dividends up on top is to point out that you get capital appreciation, price moving from point A to B, plus you get the dividends. Now, some people don't like this. You can just simply click the dividend tab down here and take the dividends away and just see them like this. Again, that's a matter of personal preference. I like to keep it on there, as a reminder that the dividends are an additional component of total return. Total return equals capital appreciation plus dividend income, if any. And of course, that could be capital depreciation, if you will. All right, so these are the many features of fast graphs. Now, you also have this dividend yield, which is another valuation ratio or reference, if you will. And you can see, like in the case of Johnson & Johnson, the dividend yield was the highest when the price was the lowest, and the dividend yield was the lowest when the price was the highest, okay? So, you can point to that, and that tells you what the dividend yields were. And this, again, just gives you another valuation reference. It's something to use. And, of course, you can put spinoffs and splits on the graph if they had one. Johnson & Johnson, doesn't have any. There's the splits that they had, and the last split was in 2001. That's before this time. But now if I put this out here further, I start with 2002, so I've got no splits on Johnson & Johnson. This calculating factor that I talked about is important because if I measure Johnson & Johnson when it was fully valued to undervalued, I can see that I've actually lost money even during a time when Johnson & Johnson had great operating results. On the other hand, if I buy the stock at fair value and just measure it to fair value, I can see that I got a nice 11% rate of return. So this helps you basically do some real simple back tests and, look at the effects of things like valuation and so on. Okay, so those are the primary features that are available to you. This circle up here gives you the ability to look at what your login is, your profile, and so on. And then this question mark is important because the question mark allows you to contact support, and it also provides the learning center. And we're going to be eventually putting these videos. We're going to put a new tab here called tutorial videos. Also have these videos posted on our regular YouTube site as a playlist. But anyway, this was a fast graph tutorial on what's available on the historical graph alone. Now, again, you can access, other things like the performance results, the forecasting graph, the analyst scorecard can all be accessed to those. And we're going to cover tutorials on how to utilize each of those as a separate tutorial. But here was just to give you some ideas of what was available. I think if I hadn't covered it, you've got the external links. These allow you to go directly into other websites. Like, for example, I subscribe to Morningstar, and so I can go directly into Morningstar and get, information and research. So the idea is to help you facilitate the research process. That's what fast graphs are all about. Anyway, this has been Chuck Carnevale saying thanks for watching. I appreciate all you subscribers. I hope, you've learned something here. If you weren't aware of all these features, I hope you now are. Feel free to contact us anytime. If you have any questions, we really appreciate you guys, and we want you to get the maximum benefit out of the tool. The tool has so many options, and it's a great analyzer tool. It allows you to do so many analytics. One thing, by the way, I want to go back to the graph for a moment that I kind of forgot about was the scroll bars. You can actually scroll into past periods of time by simply using these scroll bars. So I apologize I left that out, but you can use that, to also look at different historical time frames. Anyway, once again, this has been Chuck Carnevale. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions that I mentioned, give us a call. And by the way, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, because we will continuously be doing videos on the YouTube channel, and also, embedded in those videos would be helpful tips and hints on how to utilize fast graphs better. Again, thank you for being a subscriber to our wonderful tool. We appreciate you, and you're a member of our family as far as we're concerned. Thanks.